يخفون وما يعلنون. أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين. وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم. الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون. أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم؟ بلى وهو الخلاق العليم. إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون. فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العصم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك واستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لقبائحي ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك. ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترت وكم من فادح من البلاء أقلت وكم من عثار وقيت وكم من مكروه دفعت وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرتا. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرط بي سوء حالي وقصرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد أملي وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي. يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك وخالفت بعض أوامرك فلك الحمد علي جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شد وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي. هبني لابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهج به لساني من ذكرك واعتقده ضميري من حبك وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك، هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيت، أو تباعد من أدنيت، أو تشرد من آويت، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقا، وبشكرك مادحا، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققا، وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعا، وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعا، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنا. ما هكذا الظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا ربي، وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها، وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء مكروه قليل مكثوه، يسير بقاؤه قصير مدته. فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي، فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين؟ يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو، ولما منها ضج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدتي أم لطول البلاء ومدتي؟ فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك، وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك، وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي. صبرت على عذابك، فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وهبني صبرت على حر نارك، فكيف أصبر عن النذر إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا، لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج الآمنين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفتي، وذاك طعم عذابها بمعصيتي، وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرتي، وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي. فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تولمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه؟ أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه؟ أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها هيهات؟ ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك، فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما، وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما، لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين، وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما، أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي، فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررته وكل جهل عملته كتمته أو أعلنته أخفيته أو أظهرته، وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي، وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم، وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت، وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلت أو إحسان فضلت أو بر نشرت أو رزق بسطت أو ذنب تغفره أو خطأ تستره. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي، يا من بيده ناصيتي، يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورا وبخدمتك موصولا وأعمالي عندك مقبولا، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرا. يا سيدي، يا من عليه معولي، يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، قو على خدمتك جوارحي واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين. وأسرع إليك في البارزين، وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين، وأدنو منك ذنو المخلصين، وأخافك مخافة الموقنين، وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فارج، ومن كادني فكد، واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك، وأقربهم منزلة منك، وأخصهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك. وجد لي بجودك، واعطف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، واقلني عثرتي، واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك، وضمنت لهم الإجابة. فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، وبلغني منايا، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي. يا سريع الرضا، اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء. يا من اسمه دواء، وذكره شفاء، وطاعته غنى، ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء، وسلاهه البكاء. يا سابغ النعم، يا دافع النقم، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلم، يا عالما لا يعلم، صل على محمد وآل محمد، وافعل بي ما أنت أهله. وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. سورة المباركة الفاتحة.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. يا علي يا عظيم يا غفور يا رحيم، أنت الرب العظيم الذي ليس كمثله شيء، وهو السميع البصير. وهذا شهر نظمته وكرمته وشرفته وفضلته على الشهور، وهو الشهر الذي فرضت صيامه علي، وهو شهر رمضان الذي أنزلت فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان، وجعلت فيه ليلة القدر وجعلتها خيرا من 1000 شهر. ويا ذا المن ولا يمن عليك، من علي بفكاك رقبتي من النار، في من تمن علي وادخل الجنة برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم رب شهر رمضان الذي أنزلت فيه القرآن وافترضت على عبادك فيه الصيام، صل على محمد وآل محمد، وارزقني حج بيتك الحرام في عامي هذا وفي كل عام، واغفر لي تلك الذنوب العظام، فإنه لا يغفرها غيرك يا رحمن يا علام. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم يفتتح الثناء بحمدك وأنت مسدد للصواب بمنك، وأيقنت أنك أنت أرحم الراحمين في موضع العفو والرحمة، وأشد المعاقبين في موضع النكال والنقمة، وأعظم المتجبرين في موضع الكبرياء والعظمة. اللهم أذنت لي في دعائك ومسألتك، واسمع يا سميع مدحتي، وأجب يا رحيم دعوتي، وأكل يا غفور عثرتي. فكم يا إله من كربة قد فرجتها، وهموم قد كشفتها، وعثرة قد أقلتها، ورحمة قد نشرتها، وهلكة بلاء قد فككتها. الحمد لله الذي لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا، ولم يكن له شريك في الملك، ولم يكن له ولي من الذل، وكبره تكبيرا. الله أكبر. الحمد لله بجميع محامده كلها، على جميع نعمه كلها. الحمد لله الذي لا مضاد له في ملكه، ولا منازع له في أمره. الحمد لله الذي لا شريك له في خلقه، ولا شبيه له في عظمته. الحمد لله الفاش في الخلق أمره، وحمده الظاهر بالكرم مجده، الباسط بالجود يده، الذي لا تنقص خزائنه ولا تزيده كثرة العطاء إلا جودا وكرما، إنه هو العزيز الوهاب. اللهم إني أسألك قليلا من كثير، مع حاجة به عليه عظيمة، وغناك عنه قديم، وهو عندي كثير، وهو عليك سهل يسير. اللهم إن عفوك عن ذنبي، وتجاوزك عن خطيئتي، وصفوك عن ظلمي، وسترك على قبيح عملي، وحلمك عن كثير جرمي عندما كان من خطائي وعمدي أطمعني في أن أسألك ما لا أستوجبه منك، الذي رزقتني من رحمتك، وريتني من قدرتك، وعرفتني من إجابتك. فصرت أدعوك آمنا، وأسألك مستأنسا لا خائفا ولا وجلا، مدلا عليك فيما قصدت فيه إليك. فإن أبت عني اعتبت بجهلي عليك، ولعل الذي أبت عني هو خير لي لعلمك بعاقبة الأمور. فلم أر مولا كريما أصبر على عبد لئيم منك علي. يا ربي إنك تدعوني فأولي عنك، وتتحبب إلي فأتبغض إليك، وتتودد إلي فلا أقبل منك. كأن لي يتطول عليك، فلم يمنعك ذلك من الرحمة لي والإحسان إلي والتفضل علي بجودك وكرمك. فارحم عبدك الجاهل، وجد عليه بفضل إحسانك، إنك جواد كريم. الحمد لله مالك الملك، مجري الفلك، مسخر الرياح، فالق الإصباح، ديان الدين، رب العالمين. الحمد لله على حلمه بعد علمه، والحمد لله على عفوه بعد قدرته، والحمد لله على طول أناته في غضبه، وهو قادر على ما يريد. الحمد لله خالق الخلق، باسط الرزق، فالق الإصباح، ذي الجلال والإكرام والفضل والإنعام، الذي بعد فلا يرى، وقرب فشهد النجوى تبارك وتعالى. الحمد لله الذي ليس له منازع يعادله، ولا شبيه يشاكله، ولا ظهير يعاضده. قهر بعزة الأعزاء، وتواضع لعظمة العظماء، فبلغ بقدرته ما يشاء. الحمد لله الذي يجيبني حين أناديه، ويستر علي كل عورة وأنا عاصيه، ويعظم النعمة علي فلا أجازه. فكم من موهبة هنية قد عاتاني، وعزيمة مخوفة قد كفاني، وبهجة مونكة قد أراني، فأثني عليه حامدا واذكره مسبها. الحمد لله الذي لا يحتك حجابه، ولا يغلق بابه، ولا يرد السائل، ولا يخيب عامله. الحمد لله الذي أمن الخائفين، وينجي الصالحين ويرفع المستضعفين ويذع المستكبرين ويهلك ملوكا ويستخلف آخرين. والحمد لله قاسم الجبارين مبير الظالمين مدرك الهاربين نقال الظالمين صريخ المستصرخين موضي حاجات الطالبين معتمد المؤمنين. الحمد لله الذي من خشيته ترعد السماء وسكانها وترجف الأرض وعمارها تموج البحار ومن يسبح في غمراتها. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. الحمد لله الذي يخلق ولم يخلق ويرزق ولا يرزق ويطعم ولا يطعم ويميت الأحياء ويحيي الموتى وهو حي لا يموت بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وأمينك وصفيك وحبيبك وخيرتك من خلقك وحافظ سرك وبلغ رسالاتك أفضل وأحسن وأجمل وأكمل وأزكى وأنمى وأطيب وأطهر وأسنى وأكثر ما صليت وباركت وترحمت وتحننت وسلمت على أحد من عبادك وأنبيائك ورسلك وصفوتك وأهل الكرامة عليك من خلقك. اللهم صل على علي أمير المؤمنين ووصي رسول رب العالمين عبدك ووليك وأخي رسولك وحجتك على خلقك وآيتك الكبرى والنبأ العظيم. وصل على صديقة الطاهرة فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. وصل على ستي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة. وصل على أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهديين وججك على عبادك ومنائك في بلادك صلاة كثيرة دائمة. اللهم وصل على ولي أمرك القائم المؤمل والعدل المنتظر وحفه بملائكتك المقربين وأيده بروح القدس يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعله الداعي إلى كتابك والقائم بدينك استخلفوا في الأرض كما استخلفت الذين من قبله مكن له دينه الذي ارتزيته له أبدله من بعد خوف أمنا يعبدك لا يشرك بك شيئا. اللهم أعزه وعزز به وانصره وانتصر به وانصره نصرا عزيزا وافتح له فتحا يسيرا واجعل له من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا. اللهم أظهر به دينك وسنة نبيك حتى لا يستخفي بشيء من الحق مخافة أحد من الخلق. اللهم إنا نرغب إليك في دولة كريمة تعز بها الإسلام وأهله وتذل بها النفاق وأهله وتجعلنا فيها من الدعاة إلى طاعتك والقادة إلى سبيلك وترزقنا بها كرامة الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم ما عرفتنا من الحق فحملناه وما قصرنا عنه فبلغناه. اللهم المن به شعثنا واشعب به صدعنا وارتق به فتقنا وكثر به قلتنا وعزز به ذلتنا وأغني به عائلنا واغض به عن مغرمنا واجبر به فقرنا وسد به خلتنا ويسر به أسرنا وبيض به وجوهنا وفك به أسرنا وأنجح به طلبتنا وأنجز به مواعيدنا واستجب به دعوتنا وآتنا به سؤلنا وبلغنا به من الدنيا والآخرة أعمالنا وآتنا به فوق رغبتنا يا خير المسؤولين وأوسع المعطين. اشف به صدورنا وأذب به غيظ قلوبنا واهدنا به لما اختلف فيه من الحق بإذنك إنك تهدي من تشاء إلى صراط مستقيم. وانصرنا به على عدوك وعدونا إله الحق آمين. اللهم إنا نشكو إليك فقد نبينا صلواتك عليه وآله وغيبة ولينا وكثرة عدونا وقلة عددنا وشدة الفتن بنا وتظاهر الزمان علينا فصل على محمد وآله وعنا على ذلك بفتح منك تؤجله وبضر تكشفه ونصر تعزه وسلطان حق تظهره ورحمة منك تجللناها وعافية منك تلبسناها برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم برحمتك في الصالحين فأدخلنا وفي عليين فارفعنا وبكأس من معين من عين سلسبيل فاسقنا ومن الحور العين برحمتك فزوجنا ومن الولدان المخلدين كأنهم لؤلؤ مكنون فأخدمنا ومن ثمار الجنة والحوم الطير فأطعمنا ومن ثياب السندس والحرير والاستبرق فألبسنا وليلة القدر وحج بيتك الحرام وقتلا في سبيلك فوفق لنا وصالح الدعاء والمسألة فاستجب لنا وإذا جمعت الأولين والآخرين يوم القيامة فارحمنا وبراءة من النار فاكتب لنا وفي جهنم فلا تغلنا وفي عذابك وحوانك فلا تبتلنا ومن الزكوم والضري فلا تطعمنه مع الشياطين فلا تجعلنا وفي النار على وجوهنا فلا تكببنا ومن ثياب النار والسرابيل القطران فلا تلبسنا ومن كل سوء يا لا إله إلا أنت بحق لا إله إلا أنت فنجنا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك أن تجعل فيما تقضي وتقدر من الأمر المحتوم في الأمر الحكيم من القضاء الذي لا يرد ولا يبدل أن تكتبني من حجاج بيتك الحرام المبرور حجهم المشكور سعيهم المغفور ذنوبهم المكفر عن سيئاتهم وأن تجعل فيما تقضي وتقدر أن تطيل عمري في خير وعافية وتوسع في رزقي وتجعلني ممن تنتصر به لدينك ولا تستبدل به غيري. أعوذ بجلال وجهك الكريم أن ينقضي عني شهر رمضان أو يطلع الفجر من ليلة هذه ولك قبل تبيئة أو ذنب تعذبني إليه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. يا ذا الذي كان قبل كل شيء ثم خلق كل شيء ثم يبقى ويفنى كل شيء. يا ذا الذي ليس كمثله شيء ويا ذا الذي ليس في السماوات العلى ولا في الأرضين السفلى ولا فوقهن ولا تحتهن ولا بينهن إله يعبد غيره. لك الحمد حمدا لا يقوى على إحصائه إلا أنت. فصل على محمد وآل محمد صلاة لا يقوى على إحصائها إلا أنت. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. إلهي وقف السائلون ببابك ولاذ الفقراء بجنابك ووقف السفينة المساكين على ساحل بحر جودك وكرمك يرجون الجواز إلى ساحة رحمتك ونعمتك. إلهي إن كنت لا ترحم في هذا الشهر الشريف إلا لمن أخلص لك في صيامه وقيامه فمن للمذنب المقصر إذا غرق في بحر ذنوبه وآثامه. إلهي إن كنت لا ترحم إلا المطيعين فمن للعاسين وإن كنت لا تقبل إلا من العاملين فمن للمقصرين. إلهي ربح الصائمون وفاز القائمون ونجى المخلصون نحن عبيدك المذنبون فارحمنا برحمتك وعاتقنا من النار بعفوك واغفر لنا ذنوبنا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم أدخل على أهل القبور السرور اللهم أغني كل فقير اللهم اشف كل جاع اللهم اكس كل عريان اللهم اقض دين كل مدين اللهم فرج عن كل مكروب اللهم رد كل غريب اللهم فك كل أسير اللهم أصلح كل فاسد من أمور المسلمين اللهم اشف كل مريض اللهم سد فقرنا بغناك اللهم غير سوء حالنا بحسن حالك اللهم اقضي عنا الدين واغننا من الفقر انك على كل شيء قدير. الحمد لله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة.
Let us all recite 5 times, I am Ajibu, for all those who are sick near and far, for all those in need of dua, for everybody's safety. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب مضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Let us all recite Surah Fatiha for all our marhumeens and all those who are sick near and far. Surah Mubarakatul Fatiha. With a loud salawat, let's welcome our speaker. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I know everybody has brought their Qur'ans with them tonight. For those of you that haven't, and you're going to be using your phones, we need 2 verses of the Qur'an, or 2 sets of verses of the Qur'an open for tonight. We'll use several ayat, which will come up on the screen, inshallah. But there's 2 sets that I want everybody to really pay attention to. So if you open in your Qur'an apps, or you have it at your fingertips, the first one I would like you to have open is chapter number 33, Surah Al-Ahzab, verse number 72. Chapter number 33, verse 72. And then for you to have chapter number 26, Surah Ash-Shu'ara, verses 16 to 29. Chapter number 26, verses 16 to 29. For those of you who are not very comfortable yet with the Quran, fret not. I assure you, after 15 days of doing this, you will be able to flick through the Quran very, very comfortably, inshallah. You will know it even better than you know your social media profiles. Okay? So fret not. 15 days of me saying, turn to this surah and this surah and this surah, it will become very, very known to you, inshallah. For the love of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, one loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So the verse that we are starting with for the entirety of our series is Surah Sad, chapter number 38, verse number 29. We'll start there, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم كتاب أنزلناه إليك مبارك ليدبروا آياته وليتذكر أولو الألباب آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected teachers, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In Islam, to think is an act of ibadah, an act of worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To reflect and to ponder is considered to be amongst the greatest of ibadat and acts that one can do. Hadith reaches us, for example, التفكر or أفضل العبادة تفكر في الله. That amongst the greatest of acts that a person can do is to reflect and to think deeply upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Elsewhere, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh, is narrated to have said, there is no amal if it is not accompanied with pondering. You can see here the level of emphasis there is on thinking about that which we do on a day-to-day basis, thinking about the matters of religion that are in front of us. Yesterday, we introduced two important points. One, that the reason for revelation, according to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, the reason for the Quran to be revealed to you and I is to reflect and to ponder upon it. And then the second thing, we demonstrated yesterday an example of an ayah of the Quran which at face value may have seemed so difficult for us to understand the purpose of, the benefit of, the deeper insights of. What we did very, very quickly within the space of a few minutes, just by talking through it and you giving me the answers, we're able to discover the deeper meanings of that verse. That when we have our friends and family or our community members, there should be a level of comfort, a level of unity between ourselves, that we can go into each other's houses and eat from each other's houses. There should be a bond that unites us, and this is the level of expectation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has upon us. The moment we realize that, we can measure ourselves against such an ayah. Is our family units like that? Is our community like that? Is our friendship circle like that? And then, of course, we looked at how Allah begins the verse by saying that even the blind or the weak, they have rights to be able to go as easily into your house as your friends and family. It shows you the expectations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has upon us. Tonight, inshallah, we're going to do two things. We're going to look at how thinking in Islam is emphasized, and particularly what type of thinking is emphasized. When we say thinking, do we mean a very secular understanding that says that my intelligence level determines my ability to ponder upon the Quran? Or is there something else that determines my ability to ponder upon the Quran? Number two, we will look at the difference between three types of thinking in Islamic thought. One is called ta'ammul, one is called tafakkur, and the other is called tadabbur. What are the differences between these three? Which is the highest level? Which one of these three do we start off with? And how do we ascend through the ranks of these three? Two things we're going to be able to do tonight. Number one, to consider the idea of thinking in Islam. And number two, the different ways in which we can think in Islam. It's of no shock to you that we're constantly thinking in our day. There's no one of us, but that at every moment we are constantly thinking, whether we realize it or not. We can't help but do that. But of course, there are levels to our thinking, isn't there? Sometimes matters are very rudimentary. Sometimes matters are more complex. Sometimes matters can be done through our memory bank and we go onto autopilot, so to speak. And sometimes we have to really be conscious of what we are doing in order to make that act a success. But at all points of our day, our mind is constantly ticking away. Just think for a second about the number of ways that you are able to think about whatever is in front of you on your day-to-day basis. The things that you and I do on a normal basis that requires different levels of effort, different levels of concentration, different levels of emphasis of thinking. Sometimes I might say something in the lecture and immediately you might agree or you might disagree. And you might challenge in your mind. I don't really like what he said there, or I don't really agree with what he said there. At times, your thinking is an affirmation, sometimes it's a criticism, but you're still thinking about what I've said, even if you are disagreeing with what I have presented to you, for example. At times, for example, we're not only thinking at this level, we're also thinking at another level of how we interact with other people. Is this something that is good for my work or bad for my work? Will I get the contract or will I lose the contract? How am I supposed to be in this moment? How should I present myself at this moment? I'm constantly thinking and evaluating my interaction with the other person and whether my behavior puts me in a positive light or in a negative light, for example. At another time, I may be thinking about playing a game. Sometimes games are very simple, sometimes games are very, very complex. And what's interesting is that some of the games that we play actually requires more levels of thinking and concentration than we normally apply on our day-to-day basis. You know, there's a study that came out of the University of Oregon. And it said that for an ordinary person, an average person, there are only a certain number of things that they can do at any one time. Only a certain number of things that they can do is multitasking. Now, definitely our sisters are much better at multitasking than us because they've got more to do during the day than us. But even then, the average human being, guess how many things the average person can only do at one time? Multitasking at one time. How many things do you think? 3? Sisters, how many things can you do at one time? Say again? Is that 5? Yeah? So it's actually in between the two of you. Yeah? According to the University of Oregon, they published a paper, so the ordinary person can only be doing 4 things at one time, can only be thinking about 4 things at one time. You might say that's quite low. But then when you actually think about it practically, it's not that bad of a number. If I said to you, drive from home to the church, to the mosque, just think about how many things you have to do at one time. Like most of you probably drive an automatic car, right? But some of you might have a manual car. You have to drive stick. So you've got the steering wheel, you've got the accelerator, the brake, you've got the clutch, you've got the gears, you've got what's in front of you, you might have a screaming kid behind you. If you factor all of those things in at any one time, the ordinary person is thinking only about a maximum of 4 things at one time. That's how far we can go with multitasking. What's really interesting is some other university papers talk about when people are gaming, they can actually increase the amount of things they can think about at one time. Hands up, who here is a gamer? No? You don't play any games at all? I'm surprised. Maybe I was being really ageist. I'm sorry. So my young brother who's sitting in the middle there, I think he kind of put his hand up. What's your name? Mikhail? How many games do you play? What do you play? Minecraft, mashallah. Anyone from the sisters is a gamer? Again, I was ageist, I don't want to be sexist and then rule out some of the sisters. You know, according to some studies, gamers can do up to 30 things at one time. Now that's not too difficult to understand when you've got so many buttons right in front of you, and you're having to control things with so many different buttons, as well as seeing what's happening on the screen, as well as contemplate about what your opponent is doing. Some gamers have been recorded to be able to hold up to 30 things at one time in their mind. The ordinary person can do 4. Gamers can do 30. In fact, there is such a level of concentration that goes into gaming that a person can actually become ambidextrous. Now, I'm not advocating gaming here. Yeah, some of the kids might be go, oh, the Sheikh says I can just play the whole night, I'll become so smart. Yeah, no, that's not what I said. I'm just showing you that at all points of our ordinary day, how much thought goes into something, but also how deep that thought can go as well. There's a wonderful radio presenter and author in the UK by the name of James O'Brien, probably the finest political commentator in the UK. And one of the books that he has written is on sort of the beliefs of people in the UK. And he notes some of the famous calls that he had on his radio show. Ordinarily on radio, because you know, it's a medium where you're not face to face with a person, you have to really get the conversation flowing. Most people call up and they give their opinion. They say, I believe in X, Y, and Z. I believe immigration is bad. I believe immigration is good. And then they go on a rant about how they don't like brown people or they like brown people or whatever it might be. He was unique because instead of just asking you what you believed in, he changed the mode of the conversation and asked, why do you believe in what you believe in? And he would challenge you, and all of a sudden you would see how easily most people's arguments fell apart by just asking them, why do you believe what you believe? And their inability to construct an actual argument for the things that they believe in, because most of it's based on emotion. Again, it shows you that at one level, you can really think deeply, you can hold a belief, but the moment it's challenged, the question is whether it truly is a proper, strong belief or not. Now, if you go to the first verse that we want to be able to show you for tonight, is chapter number 33, Surah Al-Ahzab, and ask you to bring it up on your Qur'ans and on your phones. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in chapter number 33, verse number 72, the weight of this thought and this mind that God has given to you and I. Have a look at this verse. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna aradna al-amanata ala as-samawati wal-ardi wal-jibali. We offered the trust, amana, to the heavens and the earth and the mountains, but they all declined to bear this trust, being fearful of the trust that was being offered to them. But then humanity went forward and accepted this trust. Who knows what this trust is? What is being referred to here in this trust? Ahsant. Some tafsir say the Holy Quran. The question will immediately come back to you, how can mountains, an inanimate object, take on the responsibility of the Quran? Does it fit? What's another tafsir of this? Ala jabalin. You see, low, if we had, la ra'ayta khashi'an, you would have seen it. So if we were to have revealed it on it. Another commentary is wilaya of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. That we offered wilaya, the responsibility of upholding wilaya, and all of these could not bear it. But again, that doesn't make sense because all of creation believes in Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. All of them are submissive to Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. The majority of scholars believe that this was about aql. That we offered aql to all of these things in creation and they rejected it, knowing that they could not uphold the responsibility of aql. But whom accepted it? We did. Humankind, humanity accepted the responsibility of aql. Humanity assumed it. But what happened? The way in which we utilize the aql, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala critiques us here by saying, وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانِ, humanity bore it. إِنَّهُ كَانَ ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا, that they were truly ignorant of the consequences of upholding this responsibility of aql. And this is important because as much as we have thinking and intelligence to be able to think, from the Islamic perspective, aql is different to intelligence. These two things are not synonymous with one another. Sometimes we translate it. We say, this person has aql. Or we say, the ahadith talks about aql and we translate it as intelligence. It's not intelligence in terms of someone being smart or having good grades on their exams or being able to get into an Ivy League university and so on and so forth. These two things do not directly correlate with one another. From the Islamic perspective, when we say aql, what we mean by aql is nur, light, pure light, which is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to us for the purpose of us being able to differentiate between right and wrong, to help us be guided towards the truth. Pure intelligence alone does not necessarily mean you'll be guided. Einstein, for example, might have been the smartest person of his time. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's guided on Sirat al-Mustaqim. But a person who has aql and is able to hone that aql, they will be guided because this is not pure intelligence, rather this is light from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah himself is Nur. He has gifted to us Nur, and so the more that Nur becomes pure and powerful, the more we are able to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more we are able to engage in the divine itself. So when we talk about tadabbur of Quran, or when we talk about tafakkur upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are not talking about how intelligent you and I are. We are talking about how to be able to utilize the nur that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to us. Give me a couple of verses that come up as an example of this, inshaAllah. And I hope, if I recall the order of the verses correctly, you will see in chapter number 11, Surah Hud, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this, about the difference between aql and nur. Chapter number 11, verse number 49. Have a look at this verse and to see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the importance of aql here and how Allah gifts to you something that pure intelligence cannot have, but aql can bear it. The verse says, تِلْكَ مِنْ Ba'il ghayb. Nuhiha ilayk. These are accounts of the unseen. Something that was beyond your knowledge. It was ghayb. Nuhiha ilayk. We revealed it to you. Ma kunta ta'lamuha. Neither you nor your people before knew these things. Pure intelligence, you getting a really high score on your exams, doesn't necessarily mean that Allah reveals to you His divine knowledge. But rather for the one who has aql and uses aql, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that He is able to gift to us something. He's able to reveal to us something that we may not have known before, but it's possible for Him to be able to reveal that to us. That is the link between Him being Nur and us having Nur inside us. Allah reveals to us a little bit more of that Nur. The location, the locus of that revelation is not whether you know your 10 times table or not. It doesn't matter if you know Pythagoras' theorem or not. It doesn't matter whether you know the theory of relativity. It is Nur which receives that. Another verse says something similar. The brothers will put it up, inshallah, chapter 19, verse 43. This one in Surah Maryam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Ya abati. This is Ibrahim alayhi salam saying, Ya abati inni qad ja'ani min al-ilm ma lam ya'tika. My father, my uncle, behold, there has come to me a ray of knowledge that has not come to you. Why? What differentiates Ibrahim alayhi salam from his uncle? The aql, and how he utilized his aql. And as such, he was able to have an insight into something that his uncle was unable to have. So in all parts of our day, we are thinking. That doesn't necessarily mean we are using aql. It could be that we are using pure intelligence and pure rationality. Rationality and intelligence helps us in this part of our life. Nur has been given to me and you to help us in terms of divine guidance. Now here, it becomes a little bit fun. How do we develop Nur? 2 ways we develop Nur. Or maybe 3, 2 of them is divided, one of them is divided into 2, 3 in total. Because it's pure light, because it's divine, its strength is based on what, do you think? And its weakness is based on what, do you think? What makes us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Really simple. It's not a trick question, I promise you. Good deeds. And what makes us further away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Sins. If you imagine you have light, it's not quite like this, but to give you a simple analogy, you can dim this light, right? And you can make it shine brighter. If you walk into a dark room, and you have a dim light, a very small dim light, only a small amount of the room will be illuminated for you, correct? Whereas if you turn up the light or have more light, you'll be able to see the entirety of the room. Simple analogy. Similarly, the nur that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to you and I, to be able to see Him, to see the divine, to be able to see into the divine, is controlled by those deeds. The more good deeds we do, the more brighter and penetrative that light will be. But the more sin we do, the dimmer and darker that light becomes. God forbid, I do so many sins that the light is put out altogether. The Quran and Islam is described in the Quran as saying, it's supposed to take us min al-dhulumati ilan nur. What do you think that means? To take us out of darkness and into light. Nur is strengthened by good deeds, but Nur is also dimmed and destroyed by evil deeds. A person who keeps themselves aloof from evil will increase their Nur and their ability to engage in the divine, to see through the divine, to interact with the divine, to allow Nur to connect with Nur. And similarly, good deeds will also make that Nur brighter. That's the first thing. And the second, or divided into two. Second thing that makes Nur stronger is what our entire series is dedicated to, tadabbur. A person who contemplates over the divine will very quickly connect to the divine, in some ways faster than any other deed. You see, this is why we stated at the beginning those ahadith. أفضل العبادة تفكروا في الله. The best of amal is to ponder upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or, as we stated from Imam Ali alayhi salam, there is no act but that it is accompanied by pondering upon it. You see? When you ponder upon that, that's the quickest way to be able to develop nur. It's not like intelligence. It's not reading a book. It's not going to university. It is sitting and contemplating. It is walking and contemplating. It is lying down and contemplating over the divine, and then the divine exposing itself to your nur, such that you take another ray from Allah's nur and add it to your own. Imagine a person who does that every single day. How bright their nur can be. I tell you how bright your nur can get. Nahj Balagha, letter number 31. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi, writes to Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. You know, really, especially in the days of the Shahada of Imam Ali alayhi salam, try to read this. It's not so long. It'll take you no more than 5-7 minutes of your precious time. A wasiyah from Imam Ali alayhi salam to Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. Letter number 31 of Nahj Balagh. Quoting to you one paragraph from this letter. How far can your insight go? Your ability to comprehend the unseen go? Imam Ali alayhi salam has a statement where he says, "Oh my dear son, I have walked in the ruins of history." Sometimes we have historical locations. You know, something took place here. There's ruins, and we walk through this castle. Sometimes we walk through this lake, or we walk through this place that has been habited for thousands of years before. You might see a plaque, you might see some history captured here. Imam says, I have walked through the ruins of history, and I've pondered so much upon them that it's as if I lived with them. Just think about what he's saying. I have thought so long and hard on the history of people and the way that they lived, the way that they acted, the way that their ending was. I know them so well and have understood their behaviors, their ideals. It's as if I lived with them. That's how much pondering can do. Imagine a person who ponders upon this. Aisha was asked, describe the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. She said, the Prophet is a reflection of the Quran. There's nothing in the Quran but that the Prophet himself was the manifestation of it. Can you see? because he encompassed it, he understood it. And this is the difference between intelligence and aql. And what we're trying to develop, actually the aql in this series. Which means that no one should be put off, no matter what age you are, no matter what degree you did or didn't get in university, no matter what your job is, no matter what your position in life is, tadabbur of Quran is not about how intelligent you are. It's about the cultivation of something that is divine to meet with the divine. And that's what we're trying to be able to achieve in this series. Now, with that comes the goal of what we're trying to be able to do. And that is for us to be able to reach truth itself and to be able to move away from anything that is false. The Quran says that there are certain types of knowledges that are invalid. For example, knowledge which is based on conjecture, guesswork. This sort of knowledge has no place in Islam. So even if you are using your intelligence or your aql and it's guesswork, has no value in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says many times in the Quran, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, وَمَا يَتَّبِعُ أَكْثَرُهُمْ إِلَّا ظَنٍّ إِنَّ الظَّنَّ لَا يُغْنِي مِنَ الْحَقِّ شَيْئًا. Certainly, conjecture, guesswork is of no avail, no use against the truth. It has no value whatsoever. So what is our aql trying to reach? Our aql is trying to reach truth. The Quran mentions bayyina, clear evidence, something which is sultan, something authoritative, something which is burhan, proof. This is what we are trying to reach through our tadabbur, to reach further into the verse, to be able to arrive at truth itself. So this is important as a background for me and you. Simple. Intelligence is not the same as aql. Aql is developed through good deeds and through pondering, becomes stronger, and it is dimmed through sins. When we use our aql, the goal of pondering is to be able to reach truth, knowledge, evidence of the divine with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ultimately, the more that the divine reaches the divine, the deeper you will get into the divine itself. This was all our discussion about point 1. Point 2 for tonight is that there is a difference between ta'ammul, tafakkur, and tadabbur. These are the 3 processes that we are supposed to use to be able to reach truth. We said, for example, that the aql is trying to reach burhan, trying to reach ilm, knowledge. Before we come to tadabbur, we need to know that there are different methodologies of thinking and pondering in Islam. One is called ta'ammul, one is called tafakkur, and one is called tadabbur. And they're all very, very interesting. And we have to be able to use them in order to be able to practice tadabbur and to hone the skills of tadabbur, which we're going to talk about for the next few minutes, inshallah. How many of you ever heard of ta'ammul? Anyone? One sister has a hand up. One brother has his hand up. How many of you heard of tafakkur? Much more, much more. Does anyone know the difference between ta'ammul, tafakkur, and tadabbur, such that they would like to make an intelligent guess or an intelligent, or even non-intelligent, it doesn't matter. This is where it becomes a little bit fun. Ta'ammul is the foundation of all Islamic thinking. So remember, I am differentiating between secular thinking, which is intelligence, and Islamic thinking, which is aql. Aql, the foundation of its practice is called ta'ammul. Ta'ammul is the primary of all types of thinking. Without performing ta'ammul, we will not be able to move forward to tafakkur and to tadabbur. Ta'ammul in the Arabic language means talabbatha fi nadari wa tafkir. Simply put, to weigh evidence of a matter in the mind meditatively. It's a bit difficult, but I explain it very simply. It means that when something is introduced to you, you take your time to consider it before making your conclusion. It's as simple as that. That is ta'ammul. The opposite of ta'ammul would be haste in your thinking. Someone comes to you with an idea, someone comes to you with a proposition, something comes to your mind, and immediately you say, that's the idea, you go towards it. That would be hasty, wouldn't it? Are you protected from mistake if you act hastily? Are you protected or are you not protected? Not protected. Ta'ammul is that protection which makes you stop for a minute and take consideration before you make a conclusion, before you make a decision on that thing in front of you. An ayah of Quran, chapter number 17, verse 11. Inshallah, the brothers will put it on. The verse says the following, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, وَيَدْعُ الْإِنسَانُ بِالشَّرِّ دُعَاءَهُ بِالْخَيْرِ وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ عَجُولًا. Humans, they swiftly pray for evil as quickly as they pray for good. Humankind is ever hasty. Allah is very critical here of me and you. There's one of the problems that human beings have is that they're actually very, very hasty in the things that they do. And when they act on haste, too often it ends up being their downfall. Ta'ammul is a type of thought process, allows you to delay, to think, to buy yourself some time, to be honest with yourself, to not act in haste. And when you have contemplated over the information that has come to you, you're in a better position to make an honest judgment rather than one that is made on haste, made on bias, made on personal interest, and that protects you and preserves you from any sort of downfall. Now, if you open your Qur'ans, I ask you to turn to chapter number 26, Surah Shu'ara, verses 19 to 29, or sorry, verses 16 to 29. I want you to read these verses with me, and I want to show you how if you don't perform ta'ammul, it can be a downfall for us. Has everybody got the verses there? Everybody has them? I'm going to give you a minute, don't worry. As I said, you'll become very, very quick to know where all these chapters are. It'll become second nature to you, inshallah, if not already. Ta'ammul is to pause with your thinking, to not haste in your thinking. Now, in the verses I wish to be able to show you, I'm going to show you how in the Quran, Allah criticizes someone for not doing ta'ammul. Whom is Allah going to criticize? Go to Fir'aun. Fir'aun in this set of verses is challenged by Musa alayhi salam. And you'll see in a minute, I'll show you, Musa alayhi salam engages in a debate with Fir'aun. And he says some things to him. Musa says some things to him. Pharaoh doesn't take time to consider what Musa has said. He responds so hastily that it ends up being his downfall. This is the opposite of ta'ammul. This is to think in haste. And so a person is not protected through their thought process. Let's have a look at these verses, inshallah. Verse number 16. This is verse number 17 that's just come up. Verse number 16. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, go to Pharaoh and tell him, فَقُولَا, both you, Musa and Harun, فَقُولَا إِنَّا رَسُولُ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. We are messengers from the Lord of the worlds. Now I want you to just focus on something because it's going to come back up in the verses. Inna Rasul Rabbil Alameen. We are messengers from the Lord of all the worlds. That's going to come up again in a minute's time, inshallah. Next verse, number 17. What should you say? What should you say to Fir'aun? And Arsil ma'ana Bani Israel. Let the children of Israel go. You've enslaved them. Let them go freely with me, Musa and Harun, so we can take our community to safety. All of this is quite known to you. You all know the story of Musa and Fir'aun. Next verse. Verse number 18. Now, having said this, the verse jumps to Pharaoh's responses. قال ألم نربك فينا وليدا ولبثت فينا من عمرك سنين. Pharaoh responded by saying, but didn't we raise you as a child, O Musa? And you used to live for several years in my house? How dare you, basically what Pharaoh is saying, how dare you come and say to me, free the people of Israel. I'm the one who looked after you all your life. How dare you come and speak to me like this? Who are you to come and speak to me like this? Sort of in my words, but I'm your father figure. How can you come to me and tell me to let Banu Israel go? Do you know who you're talking to? This is basically the response. Next verse. And it continues. Pharaoh says, وَفَعَلْتَ فَعَلْتَكَ الَّتِي فَعَلْتَ وَأَنْتَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. And you did what you did, being utterly ungrateful. Who knows what's this referring to? What is Pharaoh raising? Say again. Person was killed. Do you remember Musa alayhi salam was trying to break up a fight? One person fell and died, didn't they? And that's when he fled. You all know the story, right? So he's saying, look, not only did I raise you, but you have a crime on yourself. How dare you come to me and say, I'm acting criminally for doing what I did? Didn't you kill someone, O Musa? You did what you did, being completely ungrateful for what I did to look after you as a father figure. Verse number 20. Now, I want you to just think. God told Moses to say what? Go to Pharaoh and say, I am the Lord of the worlds. That's what Moses said. Did Pharaoh acknowledge that? He responded by saying, how can you come to me when I looked after you? How can you come to me when you've got a murder case against you? Did Pharaoh even consider what was being said to him? No, he didn't. So Moses now replies in verse number 20. قَالَ فَعَلْتُهَا إِذًا وَأَنَا مِنَ الضَّالِينَ. I did it lacking guidance. I did something, but I did kill that person, or I was involved in that incident, but I wasn't able to know the best way to be able to deal with the incident, the two people fighting with each other. Next verse. So what happened? فَفَرَرْتُ. So I fled minkum, from you. Why? I feared you. Then my Lord granted me wisdom and made me one of the messengers. Next verse. Now, he responds to the claim of Pharaoh. Pharaoh said, how can you come to me? I raised you. I did you a favor. I had you in my house. Musa responds, and is it really a favor that you remind me of, that you've enslaved my people, Banu Israel? What a fantastic response from Moses. He's trapping Pharaoh in the discussion. Pharaoh says, I did you a favor by allowing you to live in my house, and I raised you. Musa responds, are you going to say it's a favor to me that you enslave my people? They used to kill every male born. That's the favor you raise with me? Next verse. Now Musa returns back to the issue of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قال رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما إن كنتم موقنين. He is the Lord of the heavens and the earth and everything in between, if only you had faith. Next verse. Pharaoh said to those around him, did you hear what he just said? Next verse. Yes, Moses repeats it. Rabbukum, Allah is your Lord. وَرَبُّ آبَائِكُمُ الْأَوَّلِينَ, and the Lord of your forefathers. Next. Pharaoh responds, Inna rasulakum alladhi ursila ilaykum lamajnoon. Your messengers have been sent to you, but they must be crazy. Now, why is this important? Just think about it in the context of ta'ammul. Ta'ammul is a type of thinking in Islam, Islamic thinking, where if some new piece of information comes to you, if someone presents an argument to you, you have to be contemplative and take a pause and think it through. Allow yourself to be honest with yourself and not allow biases to enter into your mind, which would cloud your judgment, haste into your mind, which would cloud your judgment, lest you end up being wrong. This is what Pharaoh did. Musa alayhi salam started his conversation by saying, I am the messenger of Allah to you. Pharaoh responded by saying, but I did you a favor. And you see, instead of engaging with the point, Pharaoh was so hasty, it was more important to him to respond to the point than to listen to the point. Often we say when people are talking with each other, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we're supposed to use them in that order. Have you heard that? Sometimes when we back chat, sometimes the teacher will say, or the parents will say, hey, 2 ears, use them first. Why? Because we're supposed to listen before. Sometimes we end up having a debate and a conversation. No, I don't like this. No, you like this. And I'm more interested in what I have to say than to actually listen to the point that you are making to me. This is what Pharaoh did. Musa says, I am the messenger of the Lord of the worlds to you. He says, but I did you a favor. I looked after you. Was Pharaoh listening? No. Was he thinking about what was told to him? No. Was he taking time to think about what he was told? No. This is ta'ammul. Ta'ammul prepares you because it allows you to be honest with what has come to you. If you and I read the Quran and try to ponder upon it without being honest with the words that have come to me, then what's going to happen? If I don't practice learning to control my biases, my impulses, and I start reading the Quran, what's going to happen? I'm going to read the Quran and try to contemplate upon it in a way that only confirms what I already believe is right. That technique which protects us from those biases is called ta'ammul, because ta'ammul allows us to act not in haste, but actually to be contemplative of what comes to me. In fact, there's a lot to be said about this. There's an author of a very good book, John Wooden. If you want to read his work, Wooden. John Wooden has a book called Pyramid of Success, and he says the following quote: honesty is doing the things that we know are right and not giving in to the temptation to do the things that we know are wrong. Honesty must occur at all times in both thought and action. If we are honest, our integrity will not allow us to compromise ourselves, ever. A dishonest act is an attempt to deceive someone. It is possible to be so deceptive that we even deceive ourselves. And we can do that when someone brings me a piece of information. When the Quran is saying something to me, and I read it, but I already have biases, I already want to impose my meaning upon the Quran, I'm thinking about this, I already decide the meaning of the verse. What happens? I've already destroyed myself because I did not allow myself to be honest in my thinking. Pharaoh was like that. Pharaoh was like that. That whenever a piece of argument or wisdom came to him, he was so hasty that he would rather deflect and argue something else than what was in front of him. One of the Maraji', Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Taqi al-Mudarrisi, narrates a story. He says, me and another scholar, we're in Mubahatha. Mubahatha is when two or more people sit with each other and they review the lesson and debate the lesson with each other. He says it was just me and this other particular scholar. And as we were discussing and debating this one mas'ala, this one hadith, this one ayah, all of a sudden I saw my room, the guy, a scholar I was studying with, I saw him close his eyes and become very contemplative and silent. Minutes passed before he opened his eyes again. And his complexion changed and he became present with me again. Whereas before, even if I sort of spoke to him or said to him, are you with me? Are you awake? There was no response. Now he's back with me. I asked him, I said, where did you go just now? You just cut off the conversation, closed your eyes, and went somewhere else. His Mubahatha partner in study said, I took myself to the day of judgment. And I was making my hisab with Imam Jaffer as-Sadiq alayhi salam. You know why? I took myself in front of Imam Jaffer as-Sadiq alayhi salam. Imam as-Sadiq was holding me to account for my interpretation of his hadith. He was holding me to account for his words. He was saying to me, did I really mean that? Did you really, truly understand this thing from my words? Is this really what you took away from my statement to you? Such that you're going to make fatwa upon it? Can you really stand by this in front of me on the day of judgment? I took myself to that moment where Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq was going to hold me accountable for my interpretation of his words. This is ta'ammul. This is not allowing your personal preferences or biases to enter into the field of your contemplation. This is the first level of thinking in Islamic sciences. And before anyone can move to the next level, which is tafakkur, and then the highest level, which is tadabbur, without having the strong foundation of honesty in your thoughts, honesty in what you have read, there is no way to be able to move forward. So for tonight, all I want for you and I to do is to become appreciative of this idea that whenever we do anything with each other, whenever we have any argument, any disputation, any debate, could be with family, could be with friends, could be a business partner, could be something that you hear on the radio, something you hear on the news. We all have our ideas, don't we? We all have ideologies. We all have a starting position that says, this is what I believe in. And then someone debates with you. If you rush to argue, if you rush to respond without genuinely listening, this is not from the Islamic way of thinking. I'm not saying you're Fir'aun. Of course not. But I'm saying that's an act that Fir'aun used to do. He wouldn't even listen to what Musa alayhi salam would say. He would just respond for the sake of responding. But the person who allows themselves to think about what has been introduced to them, does not allow their biases to overcome their response, to genuinely take consideration of what the other person has said, to be honest with what you have heard, that is a divine practice. And if you can do it in your day-to-day basis, whether you're arguing with your husband and wife, Whether you're talking with your friend, with your business partner, if you can do that, you will definitely be able to apply it with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you can't even do that with someone in front of you, when you and I open the Quran, we are much more prone to seeing His words through the biases that we have. The first technique, the foundation of what we need to do, practice ta'ammul. So your homework is this. Between now and tomorrow, when we start talking about what is tafakkur and what is tadabbur, all I want you to do is to practice ta'ammul once between now and tomorrow. That's your homework. In some conversation that you have at home, in some conversation that you have at work, in some conversation that you have in school, someone is going to talk to you about something, and you're going to agree or you're going to disagree. In either case, pause. Give yourself time to listen to what that person has said to you, their point of view, their argument, what they are trying to express to you, how they feel about that matter. When you've honestly listened and not applied any biases in your response, understand that you have started the practices that need to be embedded into our approaches to the Quran, our approaches to the ahadith. This is known as ta'ammul. Insha'Allah, tomorrow we'll continue with what is tafakkur and what is tadabbur. And insha'Allah, we can start building upon this and start looking into the practices and techniques of tadabbur. Walhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, wa salli ya Rabbi ala khiratika min khalqik Muhammadin wa alihi at-tahirin. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the appearance of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, to allow us to be alongside him at all times in our life and in our death. If we are to pass away before his coming, Ya Allah, raise us from our graves so that we can partake in the victories of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Ya Allah, help us to fast better. Help us to be able to ponder upon the Holy Quran. Ya Allah, help us to reach the nights of Laylatul Qadr. And Ya Allah, help us to be able to fulfill our fast and reach the day of Eid. Wassalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In honor of our noble messenger, Prophet Muhammad, please conclude this discussion with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
زيارة إمام حسين عليه السلام شب الجمعة. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح نبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام ولي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة سميت بذلك فرضيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأسلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة لمن والأرحام المطهرة لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها، ولم تلبسك من ملهمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين، وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرضي الزكي الهادي المهدي، وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وعلام الهدى والأروة الوثقى والهجة والأحل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسوله أني بكم مؤمن وبي بكم موقن بشرائع ديني وخواتيم عملي، وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. بأبي أنت وأمي يا ابن رسول الله، بأبي أنت وأمي يا أبا عبد الله. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد، السلام عليك أيها الشهيد، السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة سميت بذلك فرضيت به. السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباء، السلام عليكم يا أسفياء الله ووداء، السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الولي الزكي الناصي، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله، بأبي أنتم وأمي تبتم وتابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما، فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوسيين، السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم إسلاما وأقدمهم إيمانا وأقومهم بدين الله وأهوتهم على الإسلام. أشهد لقد نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم الأخ المواسي. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة استهلت منك المحارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام. فنعم الصابر المجاهد المهام الناصر والأخ الدافع عن أخيه المجيب إلى طاعة ربه الراغب فيما زهد فيه غيره من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل، والحقك الله بدرجة آبائك في جنات النعيم. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا غريب الغرباء السلطان أبو الحسن مولانا علي بن موسى الرضا كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدي في يوم الجزاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا صاحب العصر والزمان، الأمان الأمان الأمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله لك ما وعدك من النصر والزهور الآن ورحمة الله وبركاته.